What's up, everybody? Tim Anderson here, aka Renfail, and welcome back to the latest MMORPG Analysis video, where today we're discussing, is pay to win really that bad? Is it really the evil thing that a lot of people seem to think it is? Why can't a game be free to play and still be a good game? Are there good free to play games with good free to play monetization microtransaction systems? All good thoughts and great discussion points. For full disclosure here, the inspiration for this video actually came from watching Redbeard Flynn do a recent video on his channel called "Is Pay to Win the Future of MMOs?" Now, this is a conversation that has spun up because of recent talk around Diablo Immortal having what some consider to be one of the most predatory uh, pay to win systems that's ever been released. A game that many are claiming is the result of a think tank that completely spun out a game purely to monetize it as opposed to creating a good game and then monetizing it. Um, I don't necessarily agree with all those points of view. It's still a great game. Lots of people are enjoying it. What I want to talk about today is pay to win really that bad? Or is it just something that people have a knee jerk reaction to because they don't understand math? I don't know. We're going to discuss that today. I'd like to take a look at, say, Lord of the Rings Online as an example. Now, this game, up until the 15th anniversary update, which was a few months ago, had what many considered to be one of the most, I don't want to call it the worst, but it was definitely one of the most nickel and dime type pay to win scenarios out there in terms of having a game that's free to play with a microtransaction system in place and a cosmetic store with all these different items that you can buy to, change the way your character looks, to boost your character, to get fast travel, to speed up your leveling, to boost your characters, so on and so forth. But it's also a 15-year-old game with a relatively low population compared to modern MMORPGs that might be touting millions of players. So when you look at a game like Lord of the Rings Online, when it made the transition to free to play, at the time that it made that transition, it was a dying game. And when it made the transition, it immediately rebounded into a game that was thriving financially and had a very healthy future ahead of it. And free to play with a cash shop or a pay to win shop very much kept Lord of the Rings Online alive. It also kept Star Wars The Old Republic alive. It also kept insert your game of choice here alive. Most games that have made the transition from a subscription based environment to a free to play environment with a cash shop or a pay to win component have done so out of the necessitation of finance. They can no longer survive on a subscription method, and therefore their only way to continue moving forward is to have some sort of a cash shop in place that allows people to use microtransactions and thus support themselves in a different way. Now, marketing 101 dictates that you're going to do anything you can do to get the customer to buy your product. Not all of those things are going to be agreed upon practices. Everybody's going to have a different opinion on whether or not something is predatory or not. For me, I've always defined something as bad or pay to win as bad the moment that it goes from being something that doesn't impact another player to something that does impact another player. That's an easy line to draw because if you're talking about a PvE, a player versus environment game, there is nothing in the cash store. It does not matter what type of items are in that cash store. There is nothing in that cash shop that can impact you as a player when someone else purchases that item if it is a player versus environment game, because someone else's enjoyment of the game has zero impact on you. If someone buys a cosmetic item, if someone buys a horse, if someone buys a coin pouch, if someone buys an XP pot, if someone buys a character boost, it does not impact you, the player, at all. However, if it is a player versus player game or a PvP game, and you're directly allowing someone to skip the line, so to speak, to skip the queue and go ahead because they're willing to spend money on something, that directly impacts you as a player and therefore crosses into the territory of being bad. Here's a good example. I once tried, and I'm not gonna remember the name of the game. I think it's called Star Trek Command. Maybe it's a mobile game that came out a few years ago. You have a ship and you control a berth of ships. And I started off playing it. It was really cool up until about level 10. And at level 10, they force you into PvP. And the moment I got into the PvP world and I was mining asteroids, I immediately started getting just ganked left and right by a bunch of players who were driving around in the only, at the time, the only cash shop available ship that was on the market. So it was a bunch of players who had spent the $15 or whatever it was to buy that ship, and they were running around ganking all of the free players like myself. That was very unfun for me, and it was also very unfair because here I was as a free to play individual playing the game for my own enjoyment, looking to go at it at my own pace, and very quickly hit this paywall where it was like, hey, if you're not going to be able to pay to play this game, if you don't want to pay to play this game, these other players who are paying to play this game are going to come along and gank you. And you either have to pay to get the same ship that they have or just deal with it. And I didn't want to deal with it, so I uninstalled the game and went away. Now, that's the only scenario that I see where pay to win is bad when you're talking about a PvP game. But in the PvP world, nothing someone else do impacts your environment whatsoever because you're playing, they're playing, you're both playing separate entities, separate games, separate clients. Doesn't matter. If someone has a different look than you have, who cares? If someone has a different mount than you, who cares? Some people would argue that a cosmetic store is immediately pay to win because someone can look cooler than you if they're willing to spend the money, and it's not it's not impacting progression. Progression is what matters when it comes to the agency of a player and what they're doing in a game. So I always come back to a game like Lord of the Rings Online or Star Wars: The Old Republic, games which would have not survived into the current era if they were relying on a subscription-based model, because no one will pay subscription fees anymore at all. People have so many options for where they can put their monthly income these days. It could be Hulu, it could be Paramount Plus, it could be Disney Plus, it could be Netflix, it could be Xbox Game Pass, it could be PlayStation Plus, it could be a YouTuber like me who has a monthly subscription option. It could be a Patreon, someone like me who has a Patreon who's asking people to spend monthly on that. There are a lot of things that are requiring people to spend a monthly amount of money. So many that it's overwhelming. And the last thing someone wants to do, this is most people, is to pay a subscription for something and this is an if they can get that thing for free. There's an interesting comment on Redbeard Flynn's video. I'm going to go to it real quick because I think it's a poignant example of what I'm talking about here. I believe it's the very first comment on his YouTube channel, but we're going to go over here and we're going to scroll down. There's a person who says Outlaw Man 6, and I'm totally calling you out, so feel free to respond if you'd like. He says, I think that's the thing. It's perfectly within reason to try and make the maximum amount of money for something you made, speaking about developers, but it's how you go about it to me that makes the difference. I personally look at a game like Apex, where I've played so many hours of Apex, but I haven't put a single penny into it and have not felt like I'm missing out on anything. Well, see, that's the problem, Outlaw Man 6. You're playing someone else's game. Hundreds, dozens, hundreds, whatever it is. You're getting dozens to hundreds of hours of entertainment out of that title, but you aren't paying anything for it. And in cases like this, we see people who are totally okay with that. They're happy to put hundreds of hours into a game if they're not required to pay anything to play the game, because most people, if given the option, will take something for free. In a free to play game, in a monetized method where they're using a cash shop and potions and microtransactions and everything else, the vast majority of the money being made from that cash store is coming from whales. If you look at something where you've got, say, 5 tiers of membership. The most are probably going to be in the lowest tiers, 2 to 3, with a handful in that whale that are skewing that dynamic, that average way up. So if we give you an example, a previous title that I was working on, which I can't mention the name of for legal reasons, had a bunch of pre-orders. We sold pre-orders from $40 up to $750. The average pre-order was $85, but the percentage of people who actually spent more than the $60 tier was in the low double digits. So we're talking, again, I can't get into specifics here, but less than 15% is what I can say without getting into getting into deep water here. Less than 15% of the people who had spent more than $60 were up there in the hundreds of dollars range. The other 85% of the people who were purchasing the product were in the $40 to $60 range. But the 15% or so who were spending hundreds of dollars skewed that average up so that instead of having a, say, $57 average, we had an $85 average. You're looking at a very small, it could be 10, it could be 15% average of players who are going to spend money on the big packages. The vast majority of people, we're talking 80-85% of your player base, are going to spend in the low dollar, $2, $3 amounts. But there's also a huge amount who aren't going to spend anything. And this is where, when the question is asked, is free to play and pay to win the future of gaming? Until such time as we stop having all of these subscription options, yes, people aren't going to want to pay a subscription to play a video game if they can get around it. Because why pay for a subscription to a single MMO when I can go spend a subscription on Game Pass and get hundreds of games at my disposal rather than just one game? Therefore, the best option for me is to choose the free to play title, which maybe has a subscription optional or some sort of microtransaction system where I can go in and spend $5 or $10 here and there. I'm much more likely to do that than I am to subscribe to a game because it gives me more options. I get to play more things, and having more things at my fingertips is not a bad thing. At the end of the day, pay to win is not evil. Pay to win is not bad. Pay to win allows games like Star Wars: The Old Republic and Lord of the Rings Online, Dungeons and Dragons Online, so on and so forth, to still exist in the modern era so that we can go play those games and enjoy them. If we want those games to continue to exist, then we need to be willing to spend money to enjoy them rather than complaining about how we don't like this, that, or the other, and therefore we don't want to pay because we don't like their monetization system. Well, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. If you like the game and you like the IP, you should support the developer regardless of the monetization system that they're using. Food for thought. Like, comment, subscribe, support the channel with super thanks. Drop your comments below. See you next time, everybody.